I think I've just experienced the intersection between a bar mitzvah and a funeral. But as we're told, it's everyone's secret wish to be present for their own funeral, to know who's there and who's not, who spoke and what did they say. I got a wonderful sneak preview. I'm rarely speechless, but this is a pretty challenging moment for me. As I hope you understand, I had absolutely nothing to do with what you just experienced. Nothing. Belle and Jillian consulted with MI6. I assume the Mossad and others to put this all together. Kept it from me in huddled meetings and stopped talking whenever I approached. So a huge shout out to you, Belle Yoeli, and to you, Jillian Laskowitz. And to everyone who spoke. And all I can say is, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shechechiyonu v'kiyimonu v'hiyonu lazman hazeh. Thank you, God, for keeping us alive, sustaining us, and bringing us to this very special day for me. I'll tell you a story that I've never told before, which is probably to some of you unimaginable. Shrub Kempner is now saying to himself, "Try me, Harris." In the summer of 1970, I spent a couple of months at the University of Marseille in France, studying French language and literature. We had programs during the morning through lunch, and in the evenings and in the afternoons, we were free. And we'd sometimes take the public bus and go to a beach not far from the center of Marseille and frolic. One day, a few of us were there on the beach, and it was a rough sea. We were on the sand watching, and there was a motorboat maybe 100 yards from the coast, and it capsized. And there were probably 7 or 8 people on that boat. And we watched as the people on the boat began swimming towards the shore and dealing with the big waves. And then my friend, I think his name was Peter, and I realized that one person was stuck, didn't know how to swim, was out there alone with the heavy seas. So Peter and I ran into the water, and we swam as well as we could, as fast as we could, to reach this person, and we did. And we brought him back to shore, and he was still alive. And then we had a very strange moment. The others from the boat who had reached the shore rushed to their friend and completely ignored us, as if we didn't exist. And I've always wondered what exactly happened. Were they embarrassed that they had left him behind and didn't turn around and go back for him? Or maybe they were troubled that 2 obviously non-French had done what they might have done. But the lesson I learned from that was quite simple. If you do it for the gratitude, don't do it. I enlisted in the Jewish Army in 1975, 47 years ago, not for the gratitude, but simply because I thought it was the right thing to do, just as it was for Peter and me to try and save that fellow. And so, what I want to do tonight, very briefly, because the hour is late, is express gratitude to 4 groups of people. And the first is my family. And I'm waiting for a screen. This lady, Nellie Chender Harris, my mother, born in 1923 in Moscow. She was a single mother for most of my life. And among the many things that she instilled in me was a pride in being Jewish. My mother never graduated from high school thanks to Nazi Germany. And she couldn't read a Hebrew prayer book, but she knew who she was, and she never flinched. Not from the communists, not from the Nazis, not from the Vichy, and not from what she encountered in this country too often, a total indifference among Jews to being Jewish. Almost a kind of ridicule, a cynicism. My mother held her ground, and she taught me to hold my ground, apart from being a great grandmother. And the next person, my father. My father, who, as many of you know by now, had quite a wartime story. And what I learned from him was, if he could only give me 1% of the courage that he showed over 12 years in fighting the Nazis, I would say Dayenu. A courage which I actually saw in 1960 when we as a family oddly had to move to Germany 15 years after the war. And when I saw my father rush out of the hotel room in the middle of the night and confront a group of those in the beer hall singing Nazi songs. One man by himself, never thought twice about how many there might be, whether the police would protect him or not. That was my father, until the very end. He stood up. He didn't mourn. He didn't weep. He fought. He fought. 10 parachute jumps behind enemy lines. After 3 years in a Vichy labor camp in Western Algeria, from which he escaped on the second attempt successfully with a bullet wound through his ankle that had never been properly treated. And then there are 2 more people that I want to acknowledge tonight. You may not recognize them. They're the parents of my wife. Without them, I would never have met my wife. The biggest gift of my life, my wife. And you saw why tonight. Her father, David, was in an Italian fascist camp during the war. One of the stories that's less well known about Jews in North Africa. And her mother, Esmeralda, whom I knew much better, exemplified for me something that too few American Jews grasp: a visceral, organic Jewishness that digs deep into her soul. When Danny was bar mitzvahed at our Reformed synagogue, Harriet Sharei Tefillah, not far from where you live, Esmeralda was there. When the rabbi opened the ark, to his astonishment, my mother-in-law rushed into the ark to hug and embrace the Torah scrolls. The rabbi said, "I knew you were Jewish, but so Jewish?" in a Reformed synagogue? But that was who your mother, my mother-in-law, was till the last day of her life. A visceral, authentic, proud, non-negotiable Jew. And with it came an authentic love of Israel and Am Yisrael, the Jewish people. And who could not be blessed by 3 wonderful sons, 3 terrific daughters-in-law, grandchildren here and grandchildren to come. I'm a very blessed person. The second group of people that I would like to thank are 3 people that, again, only very few of you, Rick Berkman, Henry Dubinsky, Bob Grease, Shrub Kepner, will recognize. Jane Silverman, I hope you're here in the audience. Ira Silverman, my predecessor, the person who was most responsible for my coming to AJC. I said, having met Ira first when he was an admissions officer at Princeton, and later when he chose to work for AJC, I want to be him. If he's going to work in the Jewish community, there's a place for me as well. Selma Hirsch, who was then the associate director of AJC, who was the definition of elegance and eloquence, and who believed in me when I certainly didn't believe in myself. And Sholem Komeh, who was the president of AJC, Bob Goodkind, you'll remember that well, in 1990, who took a bet on a then 40-year-old who had 0 management experience, 0 interest in the job, a job I ran away from. But Sholem believed in me, pursued me, convinced me, and here I am. Unfortunately, they're no longer here, but they're the main reasons why I chose this path. And ever since, I've been blessed by the extraordinary gift of an unbelievable staff. You've heard a lot about it. I won't dwell on it. And an amazing lay staff partnership. And as you've heard me say before, if I start naming names, the people I mention will forget that I mentioned them. And the people that I don't will never forget that I didn't. So trust me when I say an amazing staff, a joy to come to work to every day, and an unbelievable lay cadre. And then there's a third group. And it all began with this story that you've now heard from Sam Klieger. I went to the Soviet Union on a kind of lark. It was a government-to-government exchange. It was the moment of détente between Nixon and Brezhnev. They were picking 6 teachers from the United States to go, and we had to speak Russian and also teach English and American culture, and somehow I qualified. These were my students in school number 45 in Moscow, but the people I connected with were Soviet Jews. And Sam referred to that Simchat Torah. I remember taking the subway from school to Arkhipova Street, where the then only synagogue in Moscow was, and saying to myself, why in the world am I going to a synagogue on an obscure Jewish holiday that I never celebrated in New York? But I was told, go. And I stood at the top of Arkhipova Street, which ironically, for those of you who know Jewish history well, intersects with Khmelnytsky Street, the 17th century Ukrainian responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Jews. And I stood there and I looked down, because it was sloped down, and I saw a street filled with thousands of Jews gathering, dancing, being. And I remember being transfixed and beginning to cry. Jews were alive. The Kremlin had failed. Their efforts at cultural genocide were defeated by the Jewish spirit of millennia. And there they were. And I joined them. And my life changed on that day, because I became a witness I became a witness to the oppression that Jews experienced. In the next slide, these brave Jews who knew in advance that if they protested, they would be arrested. They might be sent to the gulag, they might be in solitary confinement, they certainly would lose their jobs, their families could be punished. But remember that extraordinary Iranian lady we honored earlier today, who said they tried every trick in the book to shut me up, and I wasn't going to allow myself to be shut up. So they held signs like the first one, we want the right for an exit visa. The second one, let us go home. Atpustiti nas domoy. Where was home? Israel. And the third one, we demand reunification with our relatives in Israel. They, unlike me in New York, paid a heavy price for wanting to be Jewish. What was it about them that I needed to learn? And in the ensuing months and years, I learned something profound. I learned that I had been robbed or robbed myself of my Jewish heritage. I was externally Jewish. I knew I was Jewish. I knew my parents' story. I didn't know a whole lot more. And then I began to discover that we are the heirs and the guardians of perhaps the most extraordinary civilization in human history, that has created, as the late Jonathan Sachs said, a human algorithm for how to live and why to live and what's the purpose of it all. And why would I walk away? And so I embraced it. And so I give a special thanks to Soviet Jews in the Soviet Union, those with whom I worked later in Vienna and in Rome, Jews that we worked on together, for instilling in me, from their experience with tyranny, the neshama, the soul that had been denied me by my own volition here in the United States. And finally, the word that every audience wants to hear. The last one. Why do I do this work? I do this work because of them. Because every time I go to Israel, we go to Hakiria. We go to the defense ministry. And we're going to see some minister or deputy minister or general. But every time I enter, I see these young, beautiful, young men and women, 18, 19, 20 years old, who, given a choice, would much prefer to be picking between Harvard and Yale, or Florida and Florida State, or Michigan and Michigan State, which obsesses our children at ages 17 and 18. But they're picking between Sayeret Matkal and Sayeret Shaldag and Givati, where my daughter-in-law Noga served for 2 years, and Golani and Sayeret Duvdevan and all the others. These beautiful young children who believe strongly enough in the necessity of a Jewish state to willingly put their lives on the line each and every day and disrupt what otherwise could be 4 years of study and social life and Greek life and sports, because they believe in something bigger than themselves. It's for them. It's for them because my dignity has been restored by them. It's for them because the rebirth of the state of Israel has transformed the essence of being a Jew. We are no longer beholden to the will of the majority. We can take our destiny into our own hands. And that's exactly what they've done. And they'll make mistakes along the way, because statecraft is an imperfect science. But at the same time, for me, what defines the state of Israel are these young people. Because I know that not only will they serve with honor, but when they leave, that go on to change the world. And in the 21st century, the world needs Israel no less than Israel needs the world. So thank you to them. Noga, thank you to you, your father who served in the Army, your mother who served in the Navy, to your entire family, to all who serve and defend the flag of the State of Israel. So I said finally, I meant it. All I can say at this point is thank you for the privilege of this amazing journey. Ted, I wish you all the success in the world as you embark on your own journey with this organization. And the next leg of the Keeper of the Flames, Danny, or the relay race, we'll have that discussion separately. I'll happily take the image of the Keeper of the Flames, especially if it involves my children, my children-in-law. Thank you to my beautiful family and my grandchildren. Thank you to all of you for making these last 32 years and the 11 that preceded it when I was still at AJC. Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael Chai.